She was 19 when they tied her to the stake. The executioner, by later accounts, said he feared for his soul, and her heart, it is said, would not burn. 2 years earlier, she had crowned a king. She was born around 1412 in Domrémy, a small village on the eastern edge of France. Her father, Jacques d'Arc, was a modest farmer and a minor local official. Her mother, Isabelle Romay, taught her to sew, to spin, and to pray. Joan learned the Urvater and the Hail Mary from her mother. She did not learn to read. France at that time was barely a country. The English king claimed the French throne. Large parts of the north, including Paris, were under English or Burgundian control. The French king in waiting, Charles, had not been crowned. The war between the two sides had already been going on for nearly 100 years. Joan later testified that she began hearing voices at around 13. She identified them as Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. She said they told her to be good, to go to church, and eventually to go to the aid of the King of France. She told almost no one for years. In 1428, she walked to the nearest fortified town, Vaucouleurs, and asked the local commander, Robert de Baudricourt, for an armed escort to the Dauphin's court. He sent her home. She came back. He sent her home again. On the third attempt, in early 1429, he gave in. He gave her a horse, men's clothing for the journey, and a small escort. She rode roughly 300 miles across enemy territory, in winter, dressed as a man for safety. She arrived at Chinon in late February 1429. She was 17 years old. What happened at Chinon is one of the most discussed moments in her story. By tradition, Charles hid himself among his courtiers to test her, and she picked him out anyway. The exact details are disputed by historians, but something at that meeting convinced the Dauphin to take her seriously. He did not send her home. Instead, he sent her to Poitiers. For 3 weeks, a panel of theologians questioned her. They were trying to determine whether she was a fraud, a witch, or genuinely sent by God. Their surviving conclusion is careful. They found no evil in her, and recommended that the king make use of her. In April, she was fitted with a suit of white armor, given a banner, and sent with a relief force to the city of Orléans. Orléans had been under English siege for more than 6 months. If it fell, the road to the south of France fell with it. She arrived on the 29th of April, 1429. 9 days later, the siege was over. The English withdrew. She had been wounded by a crossbow bolt through the shoulder during the assault on one of the forts. She pulled the bolt out herself, according to witnesses, and went back to the fighting. She did not, strictly speaking, command the army. French captains led the troops, but she carried the banner. She rode at the front, and something about her presence seemed to convince exhausted, half-beaten French soldiers that they could win. They did. In the weeks that followed, she pushed Charles to do the one thing he had been avoiding for years. She told him to go to Reims, in the heart of enemy territory, and be crowned. No French king was truly a king until he had been anointed at Reims. She insisted. They rode to Reims, through towns that surrendered, one after another, as the army approached. On the 17th of July, 1429, Charles was crowned King of France. Joan stood near the altar, holding her banner. She was 17. And then, quietly, the tide began to turn against her. The king wanted negotiation. Joan wanted to keep fighting. That autumn, she led an attack on Paris. It failed. She was wounded again, this time in the thigh. Charles pulled back. Through the winter and into the spring, she was kept near court, effective but increasingly sidelined. On the 23rd of May 1430, she was captured. It happened at Compiègne, during a skirmish outside the town walls. A Burgundian archer pulled her from her horse. The French did not ransom her. The Burgundians sold her for 10,000 livres, a very large sum, worth something like $1.5 to $2 million today, to the English. The English did not want to kill her as a prisoner of war. That would have made her a martyr. They wanted her condemned as a heretic. So they handed her to a church court, presided over by a French bishop loyal to their side, Pierre Cochon. Her trial began in January 1431 at Rouen. She was 19. She had no lawyer. The court had roughly 70 clerics. The transcripts survive, in unusual detail, because the court kept a careful record, expecting, it seems, to produce a clean conviction. That is not what happened. She answered in plain French, often sharply. When asked whether she was in a state of grace, a question designed as a theological trap, she answered, "If she was not, may God put her there. If she was, may God keep her there." The notaries wrote it down. The judges moved on. They could not catch her in heresy on her voices, on her faith, or on her loyalty to the church. So they shifted the case to something else. She had worn men's clothing. She had continued to wear it in prison, by her account to protect herself from her English guards. Under pressure, after months, she signed an abjuration. Days later, she was found wearing men's clothing again. The court ruled her a relapsed heretic. On the 30th of May, 1431, she was taken to the old marketplace of Rouen and burned at the stake. She was 19. A witness later testified that she asked for a cross. An English soldier, according to the same account, made one from 2 sticks and gave it to her before the fire was lit. 25 years later, at the request of her mother and Charles, now securely king, the church reopened the case. The 1456 nullification trial reviewed the transcripts, interviewed surviving witnesses, and overturned the verdict. Cochon's judgment was declared unjust, the process corrupted, the conviction void. She was canonized as a saint in 1920, nearly 500 years after she died. She could not read, she could not write. She had never held a sword before that spring. 9 days at Orléans, 10 weeks to Reims, 1 year at war, 1 year in prison. She was dead before she was old enough, in most modern countries, to vote. And the record of her trial, taken down by men who wanted to destroy her, is still, 600 years later, the clearest thing we have in her own words. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more.